Hey guys, SimCoder here, and first of all, before we begin, let me just wish you all a great new year. I hope 2018 brings you all that you want, and hopefully, I'll be able to help you along this year. So yeah, and again, let me just say one more thing. Thank you all very much because we reached 3,000 subscribers, which is a crazy number to me even to this day. So thank you all very much. And on the Mooncoin app, we reached 500 downloads, which is more than I've ever been able to have, and it is all thanks to you guys. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. So let's get right into the today's lesson. And today we're going to actually start working on some code for our Snapchat app. And the first thing that we are going to deal with is the login and registration, just as I've said in the last lesson. And we are actually also going to do a splash screen that will allow us to make a better looking app and an app that looks way more professional. So let's get right on with it. And the first thing that we are going to deal with is the splash screen. We are going to start working on the login and registration a bit later. And the splash screen is just a screen that appears before the app that can show your logo and can run some code for us without actually running the app. So, okay, let's do it. And we are going to go inside Java. We are going to open up the manifest, and in here we are going to actually create a class. So let's go right in here and say Java class, and let's call it splash screen activity. Okay. Yes. Okay, let's just make this bigger. And now we are going to create a drawable that will contain the aspect of the splash screen. Okay, so let's type in background underscore splash. It will create it for us. Yes, add it to Git. And now we are simply going to say layer list, and this will contain everything that the splash screen will have, and it will have an item, Android, drawable, and now I'm just going to choose a plain color for the background, which will be primary. We can change it later in the color values file, but for now it will suffice. Okay, we can close that up, and now onto the Android manifest file, and we are going to change the launcher activity to the splash screen activity. Obviously, it is the first one to be called upon, so that's the one that we need. So we are going to move the main activity to a standalone name, and we are going to type in splash screen in here. Let me just make it bigger. Okay. Dot splash screen activity. And the reason why that's not going in is that we need to extends app compact activity. Okay, and after that it should appear here. Let's see, splash screen activity, here we go. So it is main, it is the launcher, everything is as it should be. Remember, you can only have one launcher activity. Okay, so that's really important. Now if you launch the app, then this activity would appear and not the main activity one. So now we can move on to the login and registration, and the first thing that we need to do is to activate it on the dashboard, the Firebase dashboard. So go into your Firebase project, go into authentication, and here we're going to go inside sign in method, and we are going to enable email and password. You can do pretty much every other thing that's in here, excluding anonymous. It is basically the same thing, only with some minor code differences, so nothing to worry about. Okay, now authentication is enabled. Let's go inside the docs, and we are going to import some lines to our Gradle file. We are going to basically download a couple of libraries that we need in order to make it work. And we'll need the storage, no, actually not that one. Let me check one thing. So the first one that we'll need is the core, and the way you import it is just copy that, go inside our Gradle file, which is in here, build Gradle module app, and below everything in here in the dependencies just say implementation, and then open quotes and paste the code there. So I'm going to just copy and paste it because it is easier that way. And the ones that you need are the database and the auth. You can just find it here. So database, it's here, and auth is here. The auth is for authentication, and the database is for the database that we have here. We are going to use the database at the moment of creation because we must associate the ID that's created anytime a user is created with our database and actually put the data there. So if you think about it, the database that you use is different from the user's database. You have two separate tables for it, and you must connect them somehow. And the way you do this is by using the same ID for every user in the database and in the authentication database. If you want to think like that, I believe it is a good analogy. Okay, so after that, just sync it. Okay, after that has done syncing, it may take some time. I'm going to go, oops, I deleted, no, it doesn't matter, let's keep on going. We are going to start working on a splash screen, but before that, we must do the choose login or registration and activity. And so that's what we are going to take care now. So let's go inside here, activity and empty activity. Now let's give it a name of choose login registration activity. Okay, we can continue, finish, let it load. Okay, add to Git, you can add it. And in here, it will be a rather simple activity. It will just have two buttons, one for the login and one for the registration, obviously. So button with match parent, wrap content, text, the first one will be login, the ID will be login. Okay, that's all. And let's do the same for the registration button. Registration and registration. And now we are all set and done. We can go ahead and come inside the choose login and registration activity. And in here, we'll just make a simple call, find view by ID call, which will import and connect the buttons of the front end to our back end. So button and login, find view by ID, r.id.login. And let's just copy and paste that and do the same for the registration button. Registration and registration. Okay, now we can do the set on click listeners, which will be called upon anytime we click both the login or the registration button. So set on click listener, new on click listener. And now we'll have the activities here, but for now, because we haven't created them yet, we'll do it later. Or actually, yeah, let's create them now and we'll deal with them later. So let's go ahead and create an empty activity for the login and the registration really quickly. So login activity, and it will be created, and the registration activity. So activity, empty activity, registration activity. And as you can see now, we are only trying to connect everything. We haven't really written any code that's specific to the login or registration, but these are the steps that you need to take in order to make your app feel more easy on the eye to the user. So yeah, now let's just make a call here to go to the login and the registration page because we already created them, even though they don't do anything right now. So intent equals to new intent, and now we first place these activities name, so we can say get application, comma, login activity dot class, and this will create a new login activity class. So now start with a not capitalized S, start activity, intent, and place and return in the end. Just I don't believe it is necessary, but it always looks nice. So yeah, and do the same for the registration activity. That's it. And now we can go on to the splash screen activity and deal with the beginning of the app in and of itself. So yeah, let's go inside here. And now we are going to start working with Firebase off, which is the Firebase authentication system. So first of all, we'll need on create doesn't it, oops, not capitalized, so on create method, and it will be created for us. Okay. We don't need this one. Don't need this one. I don't believe so. Okay. And now we'll start actually working with it. So we'll need two variables for this. And the first will be static boolean started. And I'll explain them in a second. And the second of which will be Firebase off and off. So right now the only thing that we need to know in the splash screen is if the user is logged in or not, and if it is, then we go on to the main activity, and if he isn't, he or she isn't, then we go to the choose login or registration activity. And the way you do that is just by using the moff variable that we have declared up top as a way to find that out. And we can do that because moff, which is the same as saying Firebase off.getInstance, contains all the information that's associated with the user that's currently logged in. So we can get the ID of the user, we can get the email of the user, anything that's, as I've said, in the table of the users, the database table of the users, we can get it. So that's really useful. And if this moff is null, then we know that no one is logged in. So we can say if moff dot get current user different from null, this means that there is a user logged in because moff is not null. Okay, So then we can go ahead and do an intent, which I'm actually going to grab from the shoes login and registration page, just so that I don't have to write all the code. And we can create an intent to go to the main activity. But we are going to implement one other thing, which is to clear up everything that's on top of this. So it will clear up every single activity. This is just for good measures, just so that the user, if logs out and logs in, just make sure that everything that he was doing in the previous login is erased. So it just say intent dot flag activity clear top, and this function right here will erase everything that's on top of this activity. And then we'll do the same, but if the user isn't logged in, then we'll go to the shoes login or registration activity. And that's basically it. So we can go ahead and say finish here, just so that we can clear up this activity, even though I believe it automatically kills, but just for good measures again, it is better to have more than less in these cases. Some semicolon is missing right here, and there we go. So the splash screen is all said and done, and we can move on to the login and registration. So yeah, I don't know which one we'll do first, but probably the login, because it is the most easy of them all and we don't have to deal with the big database table. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And we'll need a couple of variables here, which I'm going to declare them all right now. The first of which will be a button and login. And we actually should have done, yeah, let's do first the layout, because that way you can understand it better. So let's go into activity layout. Let's change this constraint layout to linear layout. That way it is easy for you to understand it. And let's just create an edit text. That's what we need. We'll need two edit texts, one for the email and one for the password. So ID email, I'm going to give the object simple name so that it is easier for you guys. So email. Okay, and let's just give it an int of email. Okay, now you can actually just copy and paste this to password and password. Okay, and now all that we need is the button for the login, to force a login. So match parent, wrap content, text login, and ID login again. And as you can see, the layout is a bit strange, and that's because when we are using a linear layout, we need to set the orientation of the said layout. So orientation, in this case, it will be vertical, and as you can see, it all snaps into position. So let's go up here and actually start writing some code. So private edit text and email and password. And before all of that, let's just import the variables here. So find view by ID, r.id.login, and email equals to find view by ID again, r.id.email, and the same thing for the password. So we can actually just copy and paste that here. Password. And that's it. We are all set and done. And now we are actually going to start working with the authentication system. So we'll need two variables for this. The first of which is the mof, as we have in the splash screen. And it will do kind of the same, but some things different, and obviously a lot more. And the Firebase auth dot auth state listener, which will indicate to us whenever the user logs in to the application, and with this state listener we'll know when we can move on to the next page, which in this case is the main activity, which will have everything that we need. So yeah, now before even writing the find view IDs, we'll take care of the Firebase auth state listener. And yeah, so Firebase auth state listener equals to auth state listener, and I'll explain to you. Actually, it isn't like this. It is new Firebase auth state listener, and it will create it for you. And as I've said, this listener is called upon anytime the user logs in, and or better yet, when the state of the auth variable, or the Firebase auth in general, is changed. So if the user logs in, this is called, and if the user logs out, this is called. But because we are in the login page, the user will never log out in this page, because if the user is logged in, the user cannot get to this page. And so this will only get triggered anytime the user logs in. And actually, before writing the code inside here, we'll just do the onStart method below everything. And this onStart method is called anytime this activity started. And when you start the activity, we must start the listener as well. So add auth state listener, Firebase auth state listener, that's it. And when the activity is stopped, we must remove the auth state listener, otherwise bad things can happen. So mauth dot remove auth state listener and Firebase auth state listener. Okay, now we can actually come inside here and say final. Actually, you don't need final, so let's just say Firebase user. That's a variable. Name it user, and say Firebase auth dot get instance dot get current user, and we'll say if this user is different from null, go to the other page, even though we know firsthand that this listener is only called when the user logs in, so there's no actual need for this if. It is just a security measure in case something goes wrong, not necessarily with our code, but imagine the Firebase API decides to act up for some reason. This is just a security measure. So we can go into the splash screen activity, grab this, and make a call for the main activity. Okay, it is just the same, so we don't need to change anything. And now we can work on the login set on click listener. So this was just to listen to if the user logs in. Now we must deal with the login in and of itself. So let's say mlogin.set on click listener, new on click listener, and now we'll get the strings from the email and passwords, email, and call it final, because we'll be calling a listener after this, and because of that we need to declare the variables as final. So email dot get text dot to string, and do the same thing for the password, obviously. So password, and then here as well. Now say moff, which we haven't declared, so let's do it right here and now. Moff equals to Firebase auth firebase.getInstance. And you don't really need, you could just say Firebase of that .getInstance, but this is just to make the code a bit easy on the eye and easy to understand. And if you compartment the code, then it becomes easier for you to understand it. Okay, it's just to make the code clearer. So, and then we pass on the password and the email. And this is basically all that we need. It is extremely easy to use, to implement a login system with Firebase. So then we pass on these activities. So get active application. And then simply say new on complete listener of result. And there we go. You just check what's wrong. Okay. If you get that error, because you in here you could say login activity dot this in these first parameters, or get application. Get application is basically the same thing, but it was acting out because it needed an executor, and to get that, all you have to do, and I'm going to remove this just to show you, if you get all these lines, and I'm going to make it bigger, I'm sorry, I only remember that now. So all you have to do is click Alt Enter, this will show up, and then click Enter and it will fix itself. So now on complete, all we have to do is to make a notice to the user if the login isn't successful, because if the login is successful, then we don't need to do anything because this function right here will be called. So say if not task dot is successful, because task is what is returned to us in the moment of completion, then we can say toast, and this is just a notice for the user. Toast.make text and everything like that, and just say sign in error with capital letters so that the user doesn't miss it. Okay, and that's it. For the login, we don't need to do anything else. As I said, in here we listen for the change in the off state, and in here we make the login. Okay, so now in the registration page, it is actually really similar with some minor adjustments. In here in the sign in, instead of sign in, it is sign up. So yeah, as you can see, it is basically the same thing. So let's open up the registration part, both the back end and the front end, and go into the front end and just copy and paste them because they are basically the same thing. With with only one small difference, which is we are also going to place a name in the database. That way you can start by putting some things in the database. There's no need to only have an email and an ID, because that looks kind of bad. But yeah, and don't worry, we'll see it working in a second. Right now it is kind of difficult to imagine and to explain to you guys if you haven't worked with Firebase already, but we'll see it working in a quick second. So let's go in here and let's copy everything basically. So yeah, let's do first the Firebase off listener and then we'll do the rest. Let's just copy up the variables and add one for the name. So name. Now we can copy the off state listener as well. Let's make it bigger. Okay. Can close that up. So I just copied the Firebase off state listener. Then we can copy these as well. I'm just going to go step by step so that you don't miss a single thing. Let's do email, not name, and let's go inside the registration layout and change the name of the button because I forgot about that. So instead of login, use registration. Copy and paste that here. The ID is registration as well, so we can change it right here. So M registration, and change the name inside here. Okay, so we are all set and done. We can start by calling up this and implementing the Firebase of state listeners first. Just make sure they start up and end whenever the activity is started or ended, obviously. So we can grab on to the set on click listener, and in here we'll have a lot of changes. A lot, as someone would say, but it is easy to change it, so don't worry about that. So the first thing that we need, and I'm going to go step by step in order to make it easy, you'll need the name. So name, that's it. And now in the moff, we'll make some changes, obviously. So the only thing that changes is the sign in with email and password, as I've said before. So instead of signing with email and password, it is create user with email and password, and everything else is the same. Because we have get application here, we don't even need to change that. We do need to change this login activity. So I'm going to remove it and make it a bit more general. So get application, and that's it. We don't need anything else. Now let's move on to saving the data to the database, because right now when you create it, and I'm going to go inside here, it is only created a user in here. And let me just check. Yeah, if you add a user here, let's say simcoder@gmail.com, for example, the password 123456, let's just create it. As you can see, it is created with an ID unique to this account, the date that it is created, and the identifier, which is the email. But nothing is created in the database, so for us there's no way at this moment to connect the database to the authentication database, if you will. Imagine these two as the two different databases. So we must connect them somehow. And you do this by using the unique ID in the database, in this table, and in the authentication table. Okay, that's a quick and easy way to think about it. So let's say else, if the registration is successful, we are going to create a child in the database for the user. So let's say string user ID, and we can get the ID of the user that was just created. So we can say moff dot get current user dot get UID. And now we'll use something that's called a database reference to get the child that we want. So in Firebase, you can create childs, and you can say whatever you want, but for our user's child, we'll have users. And then in here, we'll have the ID of the user 1, for example. And inside it, we'll have a name, for example, user 1, and it can be called like that. And if you add it, you can see that it is created like this. And it will also have an email, user1@gmail.com, for example, and that's it. That's the whole idea. And you can create the ID2 and do exactly the same thing. So name user2. And this way you can connect this database to the authentication. So this is exactly what we are going to do. And by using database references, we can do that. So database reference current user DB, we'll say Firebase database dot get instance dot get reference dot child users and dot child user ID. And as I said, the users is this child right here, and then we have the user ID, which is in this case the ID1 or ID2. Imagine it is the ID that's associated with the user that just logged in. Then we'll create a map which will contain the information of the email and the name. So map user info equals to new mesh map actually. So in that case it is right like this, and we must import the map, so alt enter enter, and it isn't mesh map, it is hash map, and import that as well. And you do this because if you were to import each child separately, the name, the email, and the profile image URL, which I'm going to import even though I don't know if we will do this in this tutorial, they would be created in separate times and not at the same time, which isn't ideal, and because of that I always use an hash map for this. Put email, and we can just copy twice, name, and as I said, even though we don't know if we will use it, and I'll explain at that time why we need this, but let's just say it like this: profile image URL, and let's call it default for now. And then finally, all that we have to do is to associate these childs that we created with this database reference which we'll create inside it. So it will be created right here. Okay, now let's say userinfo dot update children, not userinfo, sorry, it is current user DB, and that has a capital letter that shouldn't have, so let's just fix that real quick. Okay, dot update children user info, and that's it. So we are all said and done. Let's just launch the app and see if everything checks out. Okay, so before me showing you the app, let me just show you a couple of things that I've changed, and the first of which is one that I'm surprised about, is that you have to have in the sign in with email and password and create user with email and password, you must have the activity name right here. I don't know why get application normally works, but yeah, just say registration activity dot this in the case of the registration activity, and the same for the login activity dot this. One other thing that I changed that I didn't realize is that in the activity choose login registration, it was the main parent, it was constraint layout. I changed that to a linear layout and added the orientation to vertical. That's the only things that I changed. So yeah, now let's go inside the app, and I'm going just to hit record on my phone right here, because I normally use Genymotion, but it is acting up for some reason and it isn't working, so I'll take a look at that later. And let's open up the app. So the splash screen appeared and disappeared right away because no user is logged in. And so now we can go inside the registration activity, and let me just pull up the authentication here. Close that up, and let's go into the database page. And I already created an user just to see if everything was working, and as you can see, everything checked out, but I'm going to show you how it works in real time. So let's create an user 2, with a user to at gmail.com, and now the password 123456. Remember, all the passwords must be 6 characters long and the email should be valid. So registration, and it takes us to the main activity, and a child is created here with everything that we want for the user 2. And if you go to the authentication page, user 2 is created right here. So yeah, now if you wanted to test the login page, you must reinstall the app, delete, uninstall this one, install it again, run it again by clicking here and choosing your phone. And that's the only way, because right now we don't have a sign out button in the main activity, which we'll create in the next lesson. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that, because this lesson is getting way too long. So yeah, but that's all for now. It was lengthy, but we had to do this. There was no other way. But yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow. We'll start working on the layouts with the view pages. It will be extremely interesting, and then we'll work on the camera. So it will start to look a lot like Snapchat really quickly. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching again. I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Ciao!